Welcome to the Transformational Storyteller Podcast. The stories we tell ourselves and others shape the lives we lead. I'm your host, Daralyse Lyons. Welcome to another episode of the Transformational Storyteller Podcast, where the stories we tell ourselves determine the lives that we lead. My guest today, Davita Garfield, has been through some incredible adversities, and the fact that she has used them to be able to live a purpose-driven life where she is just helping others and creating an impact in the world, especially an impact with women, is beyond inspirational. And I just can't wait to hear more about her and about her story.
In 2011, my childhood best friend committed suicide, and that really was the moment that I realized my life was changed forever. It was the first time that I'd ever experienced losing someone, and it just feeling so hurtful. I felt frustrated, I felt angry, I was really confused, and I didn't know that I was downward spiraling into this really dark place of depression. And I probably spent maybe the first month after his death really just crying every single day. And it was probably at the end of that month that I realized how changed I felt, but I also realized that I didn't want other people to see it. And so I started to just really compartmentalize it and, put it in a place so that I could still show up. I could put my game face on and I could, move on with my life. And it was probably maybe almost a year after that I found myself suddenly having anxiety attacks, and I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't figure out why there were days that I just felt sad the whole entire day, no matter what was happening in my life. And it was, through, that experience that I realized that something was happening, but I still was hiding. I still was covering it up because it's kind of what I've always known how to do my whole entire life with anything that didn't feel good or anything that I didn't think looked good. And it was in that space in a matter of probably 2 years that I started to feel like these weird, like physical symptoms. So it was emotional, it was physical, it was pain, it was just feeling like I didn't want to be just in the space that I was in with socially. And so I started to hide. And when I started to hide, my physical appearance started to change, and I couldn't explain that either. So it was, feeling tired, feeling achy. I started having really bad headaches and blurred vision, but I was still going to work every day. I was still putting my game face on. I was still trying to show up for life and for the world. And through that time and space, just started to really have really deep, dark feelings of depression, but I didn't know what to call it. And it was in my darkest moment that I finally realized that the fact that I was hiding, the fact that I was putting on, this game face was really the thing that was killing me. And when I started to be a little more transparent, take a little more active role in my health and really figuring out what was going on and what was wrong, finally discovered that I had a brain tumor. I'm sorry. Finally discovered that I had a brain tumor, and that I had this brain tumor really was what some might think of as like, okay, well, is this a death sentence, or does this mean that like my life is going to be over? But honestly, it was when I truly began to live. It was when I realized that I needed to live out loud. I needed to live on purpose. I needed to not apologize for not having it together, for not feeling, for feeling like I had to be perfect in others' eyes. And that was the moment that I decided that I would take the mask off, and that I would, share my journey and share my story to hopefully inspire and encourage others that no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like, maybe it's not a brain tumor, but that, your story truly does, it does inspire others, but it's also important to, completely embrace everything that makes you who you are. And when I, finally decided that, just embracing my whole entire journey really made me who I am, and just the power in being able to own, everything that I've experienced, so that I could, continue to live on purpose and continue to live out loud and encourage others to do the same.
Davita mentioned trauma in her story, and trauma is just something that I've dealt with personally, and I think most people have dealt with in some context. And so if you are dealing with some level of trauma, whether it be, something that you're experiencing or something that is being experienced that you've witnessed, there is nothing like being able to apply the principles of self-help to that situation. And one of our show sponsors, Loving Healing Press, is a leader in trauma recovery books and books about self-help, and really giving yourself the tools and the resources to be able to move from the pain into a sense of purpose. And they have generously extended a 15% discount to any viewers or listeners of the Transformational Storyteller podcast. So if you want to avail yourself of that generous deal, go to www.lhpress.com and enter the coupon code Daralyse for 15% off at checkout. That's DARALYSE for 15% off. Davita, thank you again for being here today. I really appreciate it.
I'm just so excited, excited, just so honored. Thank you for the work that you're doing to share the stories of others. I love it. It's amazing.
My gosh, absolutely. Because we are the sum of our stories, right?
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what dictates how we behave in the world and what we have to offer and the level of empathy that we have. And and speaking of stories, I mean, what you shared about your friend committing suicide, that must have been just devastating. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, it absolutely was. One of the things that I realized is that, just how our own stories intersect other people's stories.
Yes.
And so I realized that where I thought my story started with that experience, it was his story too. And there were so many parts of it that I don't know, and so many things that I don't know about how he finally got to the point where he made that decision. But it also, really was such a traumatic experience for me that it caused me to kind of shift my whole life thinking.
Yes.
And so I just, I went through this this space of, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was trying to figure out, was I a good friend? Could I have done something differently? And there were so many things that were happening, and they were all happening internally. So I wasn't really necessarily having these conversations out loud with anyone, but those were all the things that I felt. And I think that was, how I knew that I was going to be changed forever, because it caused me to even think about all my other relationships.
Yeah.
How I showed up for other people, and then, having to accept that I didn't, I really didn't bear any guilt. It was releasing that, releasing and understanding that, his story was his story and his reasons were his reasons. And while it was hurtful, I believe it helped me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I mean, there's the story that we tell ourselves that we walk around with inside, and then there's the stories that we express to other people. And no matter how safe or loving or kind a friend you were, his choice not to share what he was going through, I mean, you mentioned masks earlier, and I think that sometimes it's so hard to take our masks down, that then we do bear all the pain inside. And
it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think for me, it was understanding why the mask in the first place. I couldn't understand why I felt this need to like hide the pain that I was feeling. And when it went from, just trying to move past the hurt that I felt from his death, why was I still feeling so much pain? And then why did I feel like I needed to hide? Like, why did I feel like no one needed to see it? And that was another like transformational like moment in my life, because I realized that I had done that my whole entire life.
Yes.
And so then it was like trying to go back and like, now I need to tell myself my story. Like, how did you get here? I found myself, at 36, just having anxiety attacks, feeling tired, feeling achy, hurting, like from the time I opened my eyes to the time I closed them, and, having these things that were happening physically inside my body that I was hiding. And I had to like, really do the work to try to figure out, how did I get here?
What work did you do to figure that out?
So initially it was all like self-destruction. Like, it wasn't good work. It was no, I mean, because it was, and that's just being honest. It was, continue to cover it up, continue to put the mask on. Don't tell people you don't feel good. Show up even when you don't want to show up, because you don't want anybody to think that you don't have it all together, and you absolutely don't need help. Yeah. And so that was the work that I was doing, and that was making things worse. And it was the moment that I realized that I had to stop saying that I was okay when I wasn't. And the moment I did that, I opened this door and I opened this space for other people to step in and help. I opened the space for me to become my own advocate, because I was going to the doctors and I was saying that all these things were going on, and they were telling me that it wasn't. And they were telling me it was all in my head, and that it was just because I was going through this deep, dark place of depression. And I knew that wasn't true. Yeah. But I didn't know I couldn't tell my story to help myself. Yes. But the moment I started saying, no, there is something going on. Like, this is my body, and I know that something's not right, and really started pushing for answers. And that was the moment. But it was also realizing that my story didn't start with my friend's death. Yeah. It started in my childhood, when I finally was able to embrace that. At 6 years old, I learned how to put the mask on, from being a product of molestation, and that being traumatic enough. But the bigger trauma was not feeling protected. Yes. Not having the person that I thought should protect me. And what it taught me was, no one wants to see your pain. Don't tell anyone. Yeah. No one wants to see it. No one wants to see when you're hurt. And so I learned that. I feel like that was a learned behavior.
Oh, and then the mask is your way of protecting yourself. It's armor. And
it is.
The things that we develop as modes to survive, which at that time, at 6 years old, that was critical. You needed that. That probably saved your life. Mm-hmm. But then at a certain point, it really starts to have the opposite effect, and it's killing you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that was, and I always said, I knew I needed that. I know to get through that experience, and to I guess get to a point where I could move past it. I needed that at the time, but then it turned into every single time something showed up in my life that was traumatic, I only knew how to cover it up and to deal with it internally. And I believe that my body ultimately paid the price. I sacrificed, my health, and I didn't even know it.
Right. Well, and I mean, what you're touching on is just the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. And, I don't believe in blame when it comes to health issues, and we never know exactly what caused what and what contributes to what. But just what you're speaking to is the sense that, like, maybe something about the health problems that you were going through had some roots in emotional pain and trauma. So how has your experience of that been?
So absolutely. So one of the things that I was really frustrated about when I was going through just trying to navigate through like health professionals to figure out like what was going on, I felt like I was being treated like body parts. right? So I'd go to someone for my head. I'd had reproductive issues. I had, the emotional issues, and so everybody was treating body parts and was saying, okay, suddenly at 36, I developed hypertension, diabetes, and was just things were spiraling out of control. But one of the moments for me was to realize that, hey, I'm a whole person. Like, I'm a whole person.
Yes.
And so everything makes up, who I am and what's happening in my body. So I started to kind of take this more holistic approach that, it's my mental, it's my physical, it's what I put in my body, it's what I allow. I had to change the negative energy that I was like, just in the company of, because I realized that it fueled me.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
so if I'm angry, I'm around someone who's angry, and it makes me even more angry. And so I started to kind of separate myself from so many things and people, because I really felt like I was fighting for my life. I felt like I needed to protect myself. So I knew it was that. I knew it was the things that I ate or what I allowed, myself to put into my body. But I also realized that, there were some deep internal things that I hadn't released. Right? I hadn't released that guilt. I hadn't released the feeling that, like, I had to have it all together.
Yes.
And that somehow, if I was dealing with this hurt and this pain, that I was falling apart.
Right. Well, and you said, I had to protect myself, and the shift from self-protection being, I'm going to put these walls up, I'm going to put these masks on, I'm not going to let myself be seen, to, no, I'm going to be selective about who gets access to me. Like, that feels like a monumental shift. So you're still protecting yourself, but in a way, one way is hurting you and the other way is healing you.
Absolutely. So one of the things that was really helpful for me was I had the minute I started having conversations, and it was mainly with other women, and I would say, hey, I feel sad all the time, or hey, this is happening, or my body is changing in this way. And to hear another woman say, hey, I'm going through something very similar. And while it wasn't collectively everything that I was going through, I realized the power in that. And I realized, like, how sometimes I walked away feeling like, wow, maybe you're not crazy, or maybe this is not like so abnormal. And I wanted to open a space to have conversations with other women so that we could create this safe space to be able to kind of take the mask off. And to say, what, today, like, I don't have it together. Like, I'm just a hot mess. And, but I'm working every day to try to be a better person. And so why not create that space? And so it started with a really small Facebook group.
Really? Yeah.
And honestly, it was the thing that was fueling me, because I was still really sick. I was getting sicker than ever. I had this, my symptoms, and on top of the hypertension and diabetes, my hair started falling out. I had acne. I gained 40 pounds in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Things were happening so fast.
Because of the brain tumor?
Yes. And that I didn't even know I had.
Yes,
it was, this was all emotional. It was, all these things that I was experiencing with the pain that they had no explanation. There was no diagnosis for it. But it was in the midst of that I started this group. And it really was, it was the thing that, like, helped me get through the night, because I was up every night anyway. I wasn't sleeping, because I was in so much pain. And when I opened that space and started having a conversation saying, hey, we don't have to share everything, but if we are honest enough to say, I'm working on me, and today's not a great day. Today I didn't have a great day. Just the power, like when we support each other, and when we empower each other, that, like, through all of those things that you think are ugly or you think are flaws, you're still beautiful. You're still amazing.
Well, I think the whole notion of women supporting and empowering other women is something that, I'll just speak to my own experience. I both crave it and I fear it. Because I don't always trust. Like, and similarly to you, I've had some experiences in the past where my body was not treated with love or respect. And so it's like, how do you, like, as a woman, I have a certain level of ambivalence. So is that something that you dealt with?
Yes, and I think that the point that I was at with my sickness is the thing that caused me to make a hard shift. So it went from not trusting, not wanting other people to see the flaws, to really feeling like I have to do something different. And it needed to be drastic. So I know and I understand that that's not going to be everyone's experience, right? They may have to figure out, okay, how can I trust, even if it's still with boundaries? How can I, but when I realized that, like, I own my truth, like only me, right? And so if I share it with you and you spin it and you decide that, I own it. And if I'm the first to own it, if I'm the first to say, hey, listen, here's where I messed up. Here's where I could have done something different, or here's what I did really, really great. If I own it, there's nothing, like, I don't have to worry about what anybody else can do with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that was the dramatic moment for me. I felt like I was in a fight for my life.
Well, you were in a fight for your life. And I think even if someone isn't dealing with a brain tumor, even if someone's health is not falling apart, like, there is an emotional life, there's a spiritual life. And if someone, is going through this world totally concealed and shut off and not being vulnerable and not being open, they're not really alive either. So I think all of us really have to be some level of vulnerable in order to be alive, right?
No, absolutely. And that was really life-changing for me, because I felt like I wasn't living. I felt like I was getting up every day, I was going through the motions, and I was doing all the things that I was moving in my career, I was in leadership, I was a mom, but I felt like I wasn't living. I felt like I wasn't alive, because there were so many parts of me that I didn't even know or understand. But it was in those I call it, my moments of transparency. When I'm the most honest with myself, and then I can say it out loud, is, to me, like, that's when I can make the change. That's when I can, like, see myself and say, okay, here's what you need to do different. And so on my journey to, just figuring out my health, I was taking all types of medication. I was going to the doctors. I was taking medication to wake up, go to sleep, to lift my, I was taking antidepressants. And I finally got tired. I was like, I want to, figure out, if this is my life, then I have to figure out how I'm going to continue, because I don't want to give up. I was absolutely living for, at the time, my 8-year-old daughter, who was seeing all the pain. She was seeing the things that no one else saw. And I realized that I had to do something different, and finally decided I was coming off all the medication.
Wow.
And I described the symptom like I always did to my doctor, and that's when he discovered the symptom that was the telltale.
Wow.
And it was like in that space that I said, I finally got validated. Everything was validated. I was diagnosed with a disease called Cushing's disease.
Yes.
And it is your body's overproduction of your stress hormone, cortisol. So it's, it's your fight or flight. That is the hormone that kicks up when you are in a traumatic situation. And it's the thing that tells your body that, hey, you need this protection, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. And so how life-changing was that for me, because that really pushed me to do that work.
And it explained all these things that you were going through.
I started doing research, and I read that, like, when the body is first introduced to trauma, that how the body reacts becomes like how the way it reacts every time. And so and it took me a really long time to even be able to say it out loud and tell the story. But the most traumatic moment for me was that moment when I stood and, told my mom that this thing happened, and her response was to, never say anything. And I remember, like, the tense feeling. And I think about, like, every time I experienced something, I became that 8-year-old little girl again.
Oh, Davita, and the invalidation of your story. I mean, you spoke about, I'm the only one who owns my story. But when you did express your story at 6 years old, someone told you, well, don't say anything.
Right.
And so that was, and I'm sure your mom has her own story and her own reasons as to why she would have responded in that way. But what it did inside of you was taught you to shut down your truth.
Absolutely. And I do, the beautiful part about, I think, just this whole like life work, I think is understanding that everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And so it took me 30 something years to finally be able to say, I know my mom she has her own story, and I don't know all the details for her story, but it absolutely, led into mine. And so I could be angry, I could not forgive,
Yes.
I could, feel all those things that I felt growing up, or I could just accept it and accept that, I own my part.
Yeah.
And now I get to own what happens next. Right. So am I going to live in this space? Am I going to stay angry? Am I going to stay frustrated? And I said, no, I really felt like when I got the diagnosis and they found that it was a brain tumor, and I was told that it's a brain tumor that we can remove.
Yeah.
And you could get, 90% of your health back.
Wow.
I felt like, oh, I'm going to live, like absolutely live on purpose. And I have to leave all of that other stuff behind and really open and create a space to encourage other people to do the same thing, because it absolutely, saved my life.
Oh yeah, and it saved your life, and it sounds like it gave you a whole different way of being alive that you would not have had access to if not for coming through something
Absolutely.
so devastating.
It helped me, like I said, accept that I'm a whole person, my whole body, everything.
Yeah.
And so I have to take care of all of me. And so that means that, I've always been very career driven and motivated, like self-motivated, but realizing that there are other parts of me. So I love being a mom. I love sometimes just taking care of myself, just taking some time for me so that I could, rejuvenate myself. I'm spiritual, and understanding that like I have to take care of all parts. All parts, so that I can show up 100%, and I can show up and be, transparent and be, in a position to, just to kind of share that with the world.
Yeah. Well, and that, like what you're talking about, is such a paradigm shift. It's such a shift of how you see yourself, how you see the world. Like, what if I was to look at your life as an outsider? What would I notice different from what it was like before to what it is now? Like, what are the tangible things? Because I think there are a million intangible things. So what are some of the big ways that you've made changes after that?
So the big shift, so after I had my first, and I say first because there were two. Okay. I had my first brain surgery in September of 2014. Wow. And actually my anniversary was just a few days ago. Yeah. And after that, I remember just like being at home and I'm like in the bed and I'm writing to God, and I'm saying, God, when I get out of this bed, like I'm walking in purpose. I don't know what this is going to look like, but whatever it looks like. And so one of the big shifts that I made was I moved into, the space of like, how do I put myself in a space where I can help others and I can do, what's more than just like the career kind of, it'll help me and it'll help my family, but like, how does that affect?
Because what was your career before?
So I've been in healthcare, healthcare sales for quite a few years prior to getting sick. And I wanted to be able to, I felt like there has to be a purpose. There had to be a purpose for this pain, a purpose for, this whole journey. And so I moved into the coaching space. And that was, that was huge for me, because I felt like, if we could just have conversations, or if people had a space where they could work through these life things, like how do we get out of our own way?
Oh my gosh. And as someone who, I've coached people, I've been coached by people, whether I'm on the coaching side or the side of the person in need of the coaching, like it is so inspirational being able to work with someone that has been through some stuff, lived to tell the tale, and learn the lessons themselves. And I just feel like your experiences must make you a phenomenal coach.
My hope, my prayer really is just that I help, that I help someone, do their own work, right? Because my work is not going to look like your work. Right. And so what the things that I did, and I did, I put my experiences together in a book. And so I wrote a book probably 2 years after my first surgery, 2016, and it was tell the whole story, embrace your journey to become amazing on purpose. And really, that was birthed out of, I want to be able to share my story, but I want to be able to create a framework for people to tell their own story and to do their own work. Because what worked for me may not work for you. And so I shared the things that I didn't do so great, like the mask and the hiding and the covering up. And then some of the things that I did to finally, accept and then release the guilt, release all these things. And that really was birthed out of, I wasn't telling the story of being molested as a child. I wasn't telling the story of not feeling, not always feeling loved and supported and not feeling protected. And it came out of a conversation with some young ladies who were in a much tougher situation that I ever found myself in. They were in a juvenile detention center, and they were talking about like their house and being molested and being, not having relationships with their parents. And at the same time, I showed up to just kind of speak and give, and they were saying, "Oh, you look great. You look," they were telling me that I was beautiful, and I'm thinking like, I didn't say anything at the time. But I'm thinking, they have no idea that this picture is not telling the whole story. And that was the moment for me that, what if we told, our young women that, how it looks today, like all the things that it took to get here. Right. And that while it may not feel like it, everything that you're experiencing right now is going to shape who you're going to become.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not like you get from this place to some destination and then that's it. And then you're done. Right. I'm sure that at times you have moments of wanting to put that mask on or even putting it on and then being like, oh, oops, okay, got to take it off again, or moments of reacting in that same way that you reacted as a child. And so for people to know that too is so important.
Absolutely. And I always say that, the journey continues. Like you're forever, on this path and on this journey of becoming, right? And of just, and just embracing the journey. And so it's going to look different. So it looks totally different for me. I've experienced 2 brain tumors. I've, had the opportunity to change careers a few times and shift kind of like my business and working with other, women entrepreneurs and helping them create some structure in their business so that they can create freedom. But I've also shifted into my 40s and into the mother of a teenager. And so then that looks different. And so you're right, those things do show up. They show back up. So some days when I look at my 15-year-old and who has at times is unsure, at times I see the insecurity that she feels, and I remember how I felt. I remember how I reacted when I was looking for something to tell me that like I wasn't always going to feel this pain, and so sometimes those things, I'm looking at it and it's like, okay, how do I still work, operate in this work, and not go back, because I know that I need to be there for her.
And sometimes in the being there for her, it is letting her know, it's being a mother who can share, you know what, I have felt that, and this is what I did, or or tell me how you're feeling, let me just listen, let me absorb, let me not invalidate, let me be there for you in the way that, because of whatever was going on, at some moments
I didn't have it.
I didn't have it.
And that is still understanding again that everybody's story is their own, because I felt like from the day I had her, that was my mission. My mission was that I was going to be the mother that I didn't have. Right. And I was going to, and so then in a lot of ways that meant I was going to be perfect. I was going to be, I was going to be there, and she was going to be open and accepting. But I have to realize that my story is not her story. So on the days that like she absolutely does not want to hear, she doesn't want to hear my transparency. She doesn't want to, and not that she doesn't want to, but she doesn't at this point, she doesn't even know, I think, what she wants or what she needs. But I have to understand that like this is her story, and this is like she's now in her, walking her journey. And so I get to influence it because I'm still working to be the mother that I didn't have. but knowing, understanding that I have to kind of let her, and that's hard. That's a hard thing.
Oh, yeah.
To let her walk her own journey.
And let her fall down when she, needs to, and be there to help her up or dust off her knees or whatever. But like, yeah, let her have that. And I find it hard, I don't have children yet, but I feel like I would find it incredibly hard to let them have their own human experience. And I also found it very hard to let my mom be a human being. Like, I find it very hard on both sides, to have parents or children and not either pedestalize them or hold them to a higher standard, or like, there's something about that sort of love that it almost like gets in our way sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that even, yes, that was a hard work too. It was understanding again that my mom had her own story, and that some of the choices and decisions that she made as a mom and as a parent, may have started with the story before her, with her mom's story. And so just knowing and understanding that and learning how to like love her for where she is and who she is today. And seeing that like the woman that she is, the grandmother that she is not the person she was when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And being okay with that. And that has taken, sometimes that's the biggest work, because it's, accepting that you could stay in this space of being angry and frustrated, but she's not even that person anymore. Right? And so, and that's how I'm able to love her. I'm able to say, okay, I love you where we are today, so that we could, we can move forward. And, then you just kind of hope that like the same thing passes on.
Yes. Well, and it almost feels like that's how you are in your relationship with yourself. Like, I love you as you are today, even knowing that you, meaning like you to yourself, have committed some hurts, some wounding, and and being able to kind of reconcile that. And that's something that I dealt with as well, as someone who used to be so unkind to myself, and like forgiving myself for that unkindness, but also rebuilding trust takes a long, even rebuilding self-trust. Yeah.
Absolutely. At the end of my book, and actually it was work that I did when I was in therapy, it was to write a letter to myself. And in that letter, it was, I forgive you. I forgive you for not putting yourself first, for not taking care of yourself, for, allowing yourself to be mistreated. I forgive you, for, all the days and nights that you didn't put you first, right? And you didn't see your own beauty, right? And see your own self-worth. And I had to do that. Like, I had to do that work so that I could truly say, okay, you've made amends with yourself. Now it's time to move on. Like, it's time to redefine like what you want the rest of your life and your story to be. And we don't get it right every day, right? So I say it's a daily work. It's a daily work to, that's the journey to becoming, called becoming amazing, is, it's that daily work. Every day I get up, I didn't have such a great day. And sometimes, even relationships or whatever, life situations, you're not always going to be, feel like you're your best, but making sure you don't fall back into that place, and you just continue to do the work. Continue to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it is, you mentioned being spiritual, and I feel like spirituality is a practice, life is a practice, right? And so we just kind of keep doing things and course correcting, and sometimes the things that you've done that were really successful at one point stop working, and then you got to course correct and do something else. And and so how you mentioned that you coach now, so talk a little bit about that and how you help people to practice being their best, most amazing selves.
So really it is about just kind of accepting or, being very transparent about who you are, and then, doing the work to kind of get out of your own way. Because most times it's us in our own way. So when I think about I had all these experiences, and I still was, showing up and feeling like I had to have it all together, it was really me. I was blocking, I was blocking my way to healing. I was blocking my way to finally, shifting, my life and my mindset. And so it's like, how do you do that work to get out of your own way? But then also, acknowledging, understanding that you have to take the time for you. You have to take the time to do the work. You have to take the time for self-care. And then also, accepting that, yeah, you have goals, you have things that you want to accomplish. I'm very goal oriented.
Yeah.
I'm very like systematic. Like I like to plan and really figure out like what this should look like, but accepting that life is going to happen along the way. And so a big part of the coaching that I do, and now even having the business shift of working with entrepreneurs is, you know, I have all these goals, I have my plan, I know exactly what it is that I need to do. How do I still show up for all of those things and show up for myself even when life happens? So like life 2.0 for me was, you know, I have my surgery, I'm living my best life, and I feel like I'm walking in purpose, and I'm speaking and I'm writing and I'm coaching, and finally moved to a space where I left my corporate job and I get diagnosed all over again with another brain tumor.
Oh no.
Right? And I'm in this space where I feel like, you know, I felt like God was saying, hey, you have this amazing work to do with women. I'm going to create the space so you can do it, leave your job, do it full time. And then I got sick. And it was like, okay, now what? Right? How, and to me, that was, how do you still accomplish everything, you know, accomplish your goals, show up for life, show up for your purpose, when life happens, because life is always going to happen.
Oh, it is.
I felt like someone had let the air out of like a balloon for me, because I didn't see it coming. I didn't see the second time around coming.
Well, especially because you were doing everything right then. And I think sometimes I have this magical thinking like, well, you know, if things aren't going my way, it's because I'm doing something wrong, and there's something, and this is where I kind of like somewhat believe in manifestation and alignment work, but not completely, because it makes me feel guilty and ashamed. Like if something
right, like I've done all this work and this still is happening.
Right, like what is this even about?
That was my conversation with God. I'm like, God, we did this before. Like I thought I learned the lesson. Like what are we doing here? But I truly believe that like every experience there is a lesson, and it's all designed, you know, for a different reason and a different purpose. And for me, that was going to be the moment that I was going to be full-time in this work and in this, you know, truly operating in this purpose.
Yes.
I felt like I probably started to not tell the story as much, because I didn't want people to see the story so much. I wanted them to, you know, kind of see the space that I was entering in business. And I feel like that was the moment that God was like, no, you're going to help women in business with this story.
Yeah.
And it was a reminder that, you know, if you're going to show people how do I accomplish goals when life shows up, you're going to have to live it. And it was living it. It was, you know, I had never been employed by myself, you know, full time ever. I'd always worked for someone. I knew what that looked like. I knew what that stability looked like. And so now you're going to get through this next year with this challenge, because, you know, I have to show up to provide. I have to show up to make the money. And so if you're sick and there are days that I just couldn't do it, and I had to take care of myself, but still fight through that, because I still have a family, I still have a mortgage, I still have, you know, responsibilities. And to be able to come out of that, like that was another story, and that was something that I would be able to talk to my clients about. You know, did you accomplish your goals that you set out for this month, and why or why not? Well, this happened and this showed up, right? And so what is the work that you could do that even when those things show up, when life happens, that you still can, at the end of it, accomplish those goals?
Well, and I love too that you mentioned your purpose being tied to your story, because I firmly believe in that. And I also think that sometimes, you know, pain is it's a very present thing, right? So like when we're in the pain, we feel it. I think that's why people have multiple children, because they go through the agony of childbirth and then it's over and you forget about it. And then it's like, oh, you know, I would never, if I could recall sufficiently how much this hurt, I probably wouldn't do it again. And so I think that there's something about the fact that you had this incredibly traumatic and painful experience. It gave you your purpose. And then as you got away from it, you started to get away from the story that drove you. But it sounds like after the second experience, you really got present to why you're doing the work that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And realizing that it was bigger than me. Like the story was bigger. It's and I believe that. I think that that's the power, like when we share our story and we share our journey, is understanding that it's bigger than us, and that a lot of times things that happen they don't all happen just for us, but they really happen to help others and to, encourage and inspire and put those victories and those that overcoming, feeling out into the world and so that other people can grab it. And so that's when you realize that this is not about me. And so I'm going to figure out how to show up, how to get out of this bed and, and still be there for my purpose and for the people that I believed were, assigned to my purpose, despite whatever's happening.
Yeah. And partially because of whatever's happening. It's that's life is meant to be lived in all its messy beautifulness, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of stories and your stories, so this podcast is called the Transformational Storyteller Podcast. And, I'm sure you know this from raising a daughter, but remember those childhood fairy tale stories and you read them and there's always a moral or a lesson or a theme. And I'm just wondering, if someone were to read the story of your life, what would the theme or the lesson be what lesson would you want them to walk away with?
I think there's so many, because I feel like I'm continually learning lessons. Yes. But I think it's, it really is accepting and embracing, your life, no matter what it looks like. And that, that of course the picture doesn't always tell the whole story. And so that sometimes you see, you see someone or even yourself and you may look a certain way and you may show up a certain way, but knowing and understanding that if it's a good place, that, there may have been a lot of work to do to get there, and if it's not a good place, that maybe it's time to take off the mask and truly, do the work to see yourself for who you are so that you can show up how you look. Yes. And so I for a long time, I felt like I put that mask on and I just showed up. And one of the things that was really, I think, transformational for me was for when I would show up after and people say, you just look different. And I'm like, oh, I look the same. I'm back to myself. It was but the difference wasn't here. Yeah. This has nothing to do with it. It really is, everything on the inside. And so I think that, the lesson I think is really to just embrace the whole journey.
Well, and I think, that our outside sometimes can reflect our insides, as you're speaking about, in a positive or negative way. Mm-hmm. But I also think that's part of why I have such an ambivalent relationship to social media, because sometimes what you see, we see these other people and it feels like they are their mask, and then you peer behind and it's not, and it just creates such a sense of loneliness, right?
It does. Yeah. It does. It absolutely does.
So I love that you're empowering people to say, okay, well, what is your truth? How do you express it? How do you live it? And then how do you let your outward life and your appearance be reflective of your true inner life? And what work do you need to do to synchronize those? Absolutely.
And it is, it's that daily work, and it's that, it's that thin line, like you said, on social media, you see it and it's like, wow, I wish my life looked like that. And so before really social media got big, that was how I felt. I would see just another woman and I would say, oh, she Daralyse has it all together. Look at her, she's beautiful. She look like she has no care in the world.
Oh my
and that was, I felt like she couldn't possibly feel what I feel. She couldn't possibly know or have experienced some of the things that I've experienced. And that was the power in taking that mask down and realizing that, that it is a mask, and that there is so much beauty in transparency and how we help and empower each other.
Yes.
Really was what birthed this whole experience. And I think that it's a much harder work now with social media, and there's just this big image of what good should look like, or what happy looks like, and beautiful, and all of those things, and so it's just a continued work. You got to do even more work, I think, today.
I think it brings us back to what you were speaking about at the beginning of the interview, the idea of women really sharing openly and honestly and with vulnerability, because then we do get to see oh yeah, Davita might look like she has it all together, and in many ways you do, and there's been this pain that has gone on for you. There's these other struggles, there's health challenges that come up, and being able to really relate to each other as individuals creates more of a space for imperfection in you and in me.
And me, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if people, speaking of social media and all of that, like if people want to get in touch with you, they want to find out more about the coaching work that you do, or they want to just link up and read your book and hear your story, like what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So social media, of course. So my website is davitagarfield.com.
Okay, and that's DavitaGarfield.com. Yes, okay, perfect. Yep.
And then on social media, on Instagram, it's Davita_Empowerment Now.
Okay.
Davita Empowerment Now on Facebook as well, and LinkedIn, Davita Garfield, Twitter, Davita Garfield.
Oh, great. Yeah, and we'll put a link on the show notes so that people can get connected and possibly get some coaching or buy your book, because your story is so impactful, and I know we didn't get into all of it, right? Or all of the work that you do, but I just hope that people can feel encouraged to let their mask down, even if it's just with one or two safe people, but because we all want to own our stories, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, for creating this space. It's awesome.
Thank you.
It's awesome work.
I feel so lucky and so blessed to have had Davita on talking about her experiences of getting back up after having gotten down. And one of our show sponsors, a lifestyle and clothing brand for women, Just Strong, has the squat as their symbol because they know that true strength comes in the process of getting up after life gets you down. And they've offered 10% off to any of our show listeners or viewers. All you have to do to take advantage of that offer is go to www.juststrong.com and enter the coupon code Daralyse10 for 10% off at checkout. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Transformational Storyteller Podcast. As always, thanks to our episode sponsors, our production team at Rebel Hill Consulting, and of course, many thanks to you, the listener. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're creating stories that empower you and inspire others.